We love Dragon Ball Super, but I think that we can all admit that it has its problems. Some of these problems that the series introduced are going to be issues for the franchise for decades to come. While the fanboy inside me cheers for every new second of official Dragon Ball footage to be released, I don't know how the series is going to overcome some of these setbacks. It is not good. In this video, we'll be taking a look at 3 separate issues Dragon Ball Super has created for the franchise that now we have to deal with. Number 1. The continuity confusion is worse than ever. The Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z anime were simple. They followed the Dragon Ball manga. The anime had filler scenes and storylines like Goku and Piccolo learning to drive or having a tournament in the afterlife, but simply put, everything that happened in the manga happened in the anime. We knew which parts didn't really happen. Sorry, Garlic Jr. The animators for the show would even use Akira Toriyama's manga panels as a reference to get the show looking as closely as possible to the original source material. We can debate the fine points of Goku's personality, but by and large, they are the same story. An anime fan can still go toe-to-toe with a manga purist in a conversation. Not so with Dragon Ball Super. If everyone is to be believed, for the beginning of Dragon Ball Super, Akira Toriyama was coming up with the general storyline direction and then handing it off to Toyotaro, the manga artist, as well as the animation team for the anime. Toyotaro and the animation team would then round out the story, work with Toriyama for feedback, but Toyotaro and the animation team did not work closely together. Nobody in this production process made it a priority to make sure that these 2 versions of Dragon Ball Super aligned with each other, at least not very closely. Now, let's take a look at V-Jump, the monthly magazine in which new Dragon Ball Super chapters are published. V-Jump is generally not the place for premier cutting-edge shonen manga to be released. That's typically the main magazine, Weekly Shonen Jump itself. V-Jump is a magazine that covers video games and card games that also contains manga. Before we get deeper into that topic though, and what it may suggest, let's take a look at how this series was handled. The Super manga started in June of 2015. The anime started July 2015. For a short time, the manga was ahead, although both followed the plot laid out by the 2013 movie, although both interpret it a little differently. The manga feels like an abbreviation, skipping large portions of the arc. Why is that? It is most likely the case that the manga was being treated like promotional material. The manga skips the resurrection of Frieza arc, although it acknowledges that it did occur. You gotta watch the anime TV series or movie to know what happened. Toyotaro actually did a 3-chapter manga that served as an introduction for the movie back in 2014, but it didn't complete the story. This was also just previously published in V-Jump. It would have been odd for V-Jump to start reprinting the same story again just a year later, even though it was never finished in the first place. With the next several sagas, particularly with the Future Trunks arc, the manga started to feel more substantial and no longer take such shortcuts. It began to feel like a real manga that diverged heavily. The ultimate destination remained the same, but the anime and manga had heavily different interpretations at times in regards to how we got there. Characters gained different power-ups, used different skills, had different fights, had different personalities, and there isn't a clear consensus on which one is supposed to be better or even, quote-unquote, the real story. The general direction in these types of scenarios is that the anime follows the anime canon and the manga follows the manga canon, but what about a case such as this, where one is referencing the other, skips over certain storylines, but then forges a new path on ahead? It's just a bummer that muddies up the discussion. To further add to the complexity, the Broly movie was never adapted by the TV series or manga, but it was referenced in the manga with a single panel. After that, the manga then introduced several new storyline arcs, which continue to this day, while the TV anime ceased after March 2018 after the completion of the Tournament of Power. It has been radio silence from Toei still to this day in regards to whether or not they will someday continue the story. We can also debate just how seriously Dragon Ball Super is being taken in Japan, still regulated to V-Jump and not progressing beyond the end of Z, but that's a whole other can of worms. To be fair, the new superhero movie does theoretically take place only a year before the end of Z, so we'll see what happens. Whoa, buddy. Before we move on to number 2, don't forget to make like Yamcha and Wolfang fist that like button, and be sure to subscribe as well. Number 2. The TV anime has solidified Dragon Ball as a squeaky clean, safe property. Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and Dragon Ball GT all aired at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays in Japan. Dragon Ball Super aired Sundays at 9 a.m. Uh-oh, do you know what that means? Dragon Ball got regulated to the kiddie block. You can't get away with as much during a Sunday morning show. Technically, Dragon Ball Kai aired at this time first, setting the stage for a toned-down show with some of the violence censored, but Dragon Ball Super cemented the franchise as a now safe show. A show where you can't push the status quo too harshly and isn't too cutting edge on any front. Dragon Ball Z's combat-oriented moments excelled best when the show could lean into the intensity of situations and show real damage on the characters. Remember how wild things got back when the gang was fighting Nappa and Vegeta at the beginning of Z with limbs getting lobbed off, characters blowing up, and, well, blood? In Dragon Ball Super, during the Tournament of Power, despite the higher animation budget, feels like something is missing when the characters look barely scathed after an absolute beating. It makes it feel like the combat didn't even happen at all, and the characters are just action figures getting smacked together. When comparing it to some of the original scenes, it's really a disappointment when you realize what could have been done. The biggest danger Dragon Ball Super faces at this point is becoming a property that no one wants to rock the boat with. Those are the types of properties that get boring with no chances ever being taken. With Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, we had characters aging and major plot shifts, like the main character turning out to be an alien after years and years. Yes, Super has added the entire multi-universe aspect and expanded on the god hierarchy, but the legacy characters are still all the same, and it doesn't feel like the series is moving towards anything. Maybe things will change, we don't know. The superhero movie is getting close to the end of Z, but as of now, we are still regulated to a time inside of a time skip within the original Dragon Ball Z series. Dragon Ball has expanded to being a property beyond Akira Toriyama, and it feels like the powers that be are trying awfully hard not to do anything too radical. In Japan, the merchandising side of the franchise is going very hard with the Dragon Ball Heroes card game, which is still borrowing heavily from Dragon Ball GT. There is a good chance that even though it would be a logistical nightmare trying to fit Dragon Ball GT into the Dragon Ball Super timeline, that they are still protecting GT's spot within the timeline regardless, thus keeping Dragon Ball Super further boxed in to its regulated 10-year time skip just before the end of Z. While English-speaking fans generally don't like Dragon Ball GT, material from that series keeps getting used in new Japanese merchandise to this day. Dragon Ball Super overlaying that timeline could put some of that merchandise into jeopardy, or at least people could be afraid of that. But that's all just speculation. Keeping Super out of GT's timeline territory could also be a respect-based decision as well. Number 3. Goku has become a parody of himself. Number 3 here ties in a little bit to number 2. Goku has become a full-on ridiculous comedy character who has gotten dumber over time. This does not feel like the same Goku I initially got behind so many years ago. Goku has never been as dumb as he is right now. In the original series, he is a 12-year-old kid that grew up in isolation and had never seen a car before and thought that it was a monster. He was confused about what girls were. While Grandpa Gohan was a ridiculous parental figure for not imparting some of this knowledge onto him early on, it has been decades since then. Goku's intelligence should not be regressing at this point. There were hints that Goku could be a little more complex early on. He sought the 4-star Dragon Ball purely as a memento to his deceased grandfather. He learned about betrayal and forming a bond with Krillin. He seemed generally enraged when Tao Pai Pai kills Bora. When Goku has his rematch against Tao Pai Pai, he kicks a grenade into his face, thinking that he must have killed Tao Pai Pai. This was without confirming whether or not he was dead or agonizing about the loss of such a potentially skilled opponent. Flash forward to the Saiyan saga. Straight away, Goku teamed up with Piccolo for the sake of killing Raditz, who he left dead. There was no wish of resurrecting everyone killed by a Makanka Sappo by Piccolo per Goku's direction. The fight against Vegeta was heavily a team effort as well. Goku ordered Krillin to keep Vegeta alive, so that is a start to a pattern, but you could argue that Goku's fight against Frieza would be a clear example of when Goku's hubris and ego start to really get the best of him. Did Goku grow at all during the Cell and Buu arcs? Maybe. Goku initially planned to have the younger generation finish the fights against these enemies rather than himself. In Dragon Ball Super, prior to Super Hero, the vast majority of up-and-comers get sidelined with the exception of Goku and Vegeta. Sure, there's number 17 pulled out of nowhere and Frieza in a few spots, but that's it. Goku is now just a full-on idiot that hasn't figured out what a kiss is and probably doesn't even know what the heck happened to him that made Chi-Chi give birth to Gohan and Goten. He is more one-track minded than ever and doesn't seem to care about the next generation. He is a parody of his previous self. He doesn't seem to mind at all that the Tournament of Power puts entire universes into jeopardy, which is something that the story itself even points out. Some fans like to speculate that Goku is a self-centered character that is a single hair away from being the biggest villain of the multiverse. In the Tournament of Power, it definitely suggests that Goku has a massively careless attitude when he decides to remind the Xenos about the tournament. However, is that where we really want to be? Is that where we want to go? Is this really what has become of Goku? If that's the case, it's not like Dragon Ball Super has yet to expand upon this idea either. With Dragon Ball now being a safe product in stasis right now, I highly doubt they ever would. Long story short, Goku has gotten dumber in interpersonal relationships, which is sad when you yourself have grown up with the character. He has not progressed at all in a very long time. The series keeps teasing the idea that maybe Goku and Vegeta will learn to put their differences aside and fight together with more synergy, but there has still not been a change to the status quo. There is a scene in the Moro arc after the Tournament of Power in the manga that showcase just how little Goku has progressed as a character. I have not seen fans this upset about Dragon Ball in a very long time. These are just 3 examples of issues that have been introduced by Dragon Ball Super. Don't worry, there are plenty more as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you agree, and what issues do you have? Or do you love the series and have no problems at all? Either way, I'd like to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Wolfang Fist. Thanks for watching.